Alright, what's good everyone? The Z Trifold has landed and I've been using it for the past month. And what I wanted to do was give you a full, authentic, real review of the experience with the Z Trifold. So let's get into it. The Galaxy Z Trifold is a device that tries to replace 3 different devices in my eyes. First, it's a phone, and then it tries to replace a tablet, but it even goes further with Samsung software to try and replace a computer. For me personally, the Z Trifold is a really good phone. On the outside, it is a flagship phone with a screen that is as big as the Z Fold 7 and even as big as other flagship phones that are not, the Pro and the Max versions, the bigger versions. It's still a regular phone on the outside in terms of the screen size. Of course, because it is a tri-folding phone, it is pretty heavy and thick compared to your regular phones. But for me personally, I had no problems using it throughout my days, and it slips in and out of my pocket just fine because of how thin it is. Like, it is still a slim aspect ratio phone, so it's easy to use with one hand because of the screen size and the slimness in terms of my thumb reaching across the screen and stuff like that, and then also fitting into pockets, like I said. But of course, this phone unfolds into a tablet, and that is a 10-inch tablet, a 10-inch display coming out of your pocket from a regular smartphone. You might think the folding mechanism is awkward and it feels fumbly and stuff like that. You wouldn't want to take it out in public, but in my experience, using the Z Trifold and unfolding it has been super natural. Like, literally after the first 2 times I unfolded it, it was just second nature at that point, and it felt almost as normal as unfolding a Z Fold 7, like what I have right here. Pretty natural motion. The Z Trifold also felt pretty natural as well. So in terms of like using it in public, I know some people would rather the Huawei design with the middle option to have like a regular foldable phone, and then you go to the Trifold 10-inch screen when you're locking in and you're serious and whatever. But for me personally, in public, I had no problems taking it out, and I did not feel awkward. I didn't feel like I'm going to drop the device, because when you unfold it, it is very thin and the weight balance is actually pretty good, so it doesn't feel too heavy when it's fully unfolded. And like I said, the folding mechanism is so easy to use and so easy to unfold. It really isn't a problem for me personally. More often than not, I found myself unfolding it while walking around in my kitchen, while walking around in stores. I'm doing anything really more than like texting or responding to somebody on the outside screen. I know a lot of people with foldable phones use the outside screen mainly, or most of the time. Some people even forget that they even have a folding phone, depending on which one you have. But for me, I buy a folding phone for the inside screen, and that's how I use it. Even outside or when I'm walking around, when it's not super convenient. I feel like the form factor did not hold me back at all. In terms of the everyday experience, the Z Trifold's battery life is actually pretty good if we talk about it comparing to other regular phones and the foldable phones. In my experience, the battery life is better than the Z Fold 7, obviously. I mean, maybe not obviously, because people thought that the battery size wasn't big enough for the form factor and the huge inside screen. For me, the battery life has been better than the Z Fold 7. Like, I'm getting like 7 to 8 hours of screen on time sometimes. Usually I average around over 7 hours of screen on time, and that is even including when I'm doing things like video editing and multitasking a lot and playing games, intensive tasks. I still am able to easily get like 7 hours of screen on time, with 6.5 hours being the minimum. The Z Trifold's battery life is actually really good. Samsung is pretty good with the battery optimization. 5,600 milliamps might seem small for what it is, but the Huawei Mate X-T, which is the other tri-folding phone on the market, also has the same size battery, and the Z Trifold it lasts all day. It will last your work hours, and then it will definitely take you into the nighttime until it's time to sleep. I always end the day with around like 30 to 20% battery life if it's not an intensive day. And then if we're talking about the software experience, there's a lot to talk about, so I can't cover it all in this one video. But the way that I use the phone, on the outside, I often multitask. I often do a lot of things with one hand because of how slim the aspect ratio is and easy it is to use. And I have no problems typing on that screen, even though some people don't like the smaller screen size. It's not as wide as other phones. I have no problems typing. I even don't mind playing some games on the outside screen, like a game like Wild Rift. With foldable phones, games like Wild Rift need specific kinds of aspect ratios, like a regular smartphone aspect ratio, in order for it to work well and show you the map and all that stuff properly. So sometimes I might play on the outside screen just for that proper aspect ratio. But the Z Trifold actually does offer a unique experience when gaming compared to other foldable phones, and maybe even a little bit better in those games. But I'll touch on that later on. On the outside screen, I basically do everything that I would with a normal phone. Samsung software is amazing, and you can still have up to 5 floating windows on the outside screen. You can have 2 apps in split screen and 5 floating windows at the same time, so 7 apps on the screen at the same time. You have all the gestures, like 2-finger swipe from the bottom for a quick split screen session. All the customization. It's a really well done and good operating system. I feel like Samsung's OS is very smooth, very fast, and I think it honestly has some of the best animations in the game. It's not as exaggerated as other operating systems. It's not as bouncy, as floaty, but I think it's very smooth and it gets to the point, and honestly it might even be one of the more faster animated operating systems on the market. So outside screen is really good. I use it for anything really that I need a smartphone for. The main show is the inside screen, like I keep saying. And so going on to the inside screen, how I use that, I do different things. So with the Z Trifold, I will either be consuming content, so watching videos, reading manga, scrolling on websites, scrolling on social media, etc. I will do all those things. And the experience for all that stuff that I just mentioned is really good on the Z Trifold because the aspect ratio is longer, more narrow. It's not like the regular foldable phones that have a more square aspect ratio. And I keep saying aspect ratio a lot in this video. For people who don't know, aspect ratio is like the size and shape of your screen. And ideally you want to have a longer screen for content consumption and even different media formats. So with the regular foldable phones, they are kind of square on the inside, which causes, letterboxing when you're watching videos. Games don't really format well. Like a lot of games are zoomed in, so you lose a lot of information. But with the Z Trifold, browsing the internet is amazing, as you would expect. Your computer screen is longer, kind of like the Z Trifold. Z Trifold is closer to that than the other foldable phones and regular phones, but a bigger screen. So browsing the internet is amazing. Scrolling on social media is also pretty good because if you rotate the phone and you have it in vertical orientation, you basically have a huge smartphone. And this is something that people with tablets have been experiencing for a little bit now. A lot of social media apps are optimizing for bigger screens nowadays. So the experience is genuinely good. I personally don't like social media like that, like Instagram, TikTok. I'm not the biggest fan of those apps. Honestly, I wouldn't, browse Instagram and TikTok in public because I just feel like just kind of weird scrolling on short form videos, shorts. It's like ultimate brain rot. That's what it feels like. But for the people who actually do that stuff, the experience is really good. And then if you do a split screen, you can have up to 3 regular smartphone size apps side by side on the Trifold, and it's a really amazing experience even for that. So if you're somebody who wants to go like full brain rot mode, you can have Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok open, scrolling on shorts on all 3 of them. And then the Manga Experience is really good. If you saw my other video, like it's literally like reading a book, but honestly even bigger than actual manga books. It's really good in general for content consumption, but also for people who maybe need to blow up things and see it better. The reading experience is just great on this phone. The inside screen is not the brightest screen, but I have no problem seeing it outside. Obviously indoors it's gonna be bright enough. It's not the highest resolution screen with the highest pixel density, but the screen still looks amazing. It's a Samsung screen, and I did not find myself feeling like the quality is significantly lower or noticeable from other higher resolution devices. And I use it beside the Huawei, that has a better screen on paper, and I feel like Samsung kind of delivers as good of an experience and maybe even better in different ways, colors and stuff like that, tuning. So the screen is really good. The crease, people care about that. For me, the crease is not a problem. Not a factor at all. It never has been since like the Z Fold 2 when I got that. I never cared about the crease, and I think definitely noticeable if the screen is off and you're turning it at certain angles, but as soon as you turn on the screen, the crease disappears, it fades away. It does not get in the way at all for me personally. Like even rubbing my finger across the screen, some people it bothers them. When you're using the phone, you don't really take it in. You don't really notice it unless you're looking for it, unless you're thinking about it. And even then, it's not a bother for me personally. And it has 2 creases this time because it's a Trifold, but still no issue. But yeah, if I'm not browsing the internet, consuming content on social media, most of the time with the Z Trifold, I've been working off of it. So I've been video editing. I've been uploading content to different social media apps and editing videos in those apps. I've been writing scripts. I've been editing photos and multitasking a lot. And the Z Trifold has delivered on all those things. For video editing, Android in general is just not the best experience for that because LumaFusion is the app that I use. LumaFusion is not the most optimized app, and like the Android platform doesn't allow for different codecs and stuff like that that are more video editing friendly. Yeah, it's not the most amazing experience, but a lot of the videos I put out recently I edited on the Z Trifold. I'm doing a short series where like I'm pursuing YouTube for a whole year, 365 days, uploading every single day, and just upgrade my channel basically. And I edited like 90% of those videos so far on the Z Trifold with no problem. Video editing is good on the Z Trifold, especially with the bigger screen. You have everything there. The layout is just really nice. Regular foldable phones, I did the same stuff and it was a good experience on those, but this takes it to another level and it's more enjoyable because of how spaced out everything is. So I've been enjoying working off of this phone essentially. Working off this phone is something that I've wanted for years. This phone is the answer to what I wanted for years. Like regular foldable phones are amazing, but the Z Trifold is something that gives you a full, I would say even laptop-like experience. A tablet for sure, but the features that Samsung has in the software makes it feel like a productivity beast, a laptop in different ways. And I'll use triple split screen. That is something that Samsung has been doing for a long time on their foldable phones and their tablets. And triple split screen, you might think like it's useless to have 3 apps, crammed on the screen, but really it's not crammed. If you think it's crammed, then I think it's limitation by your imagination, because with the Z Trifold, you have the most flexible multitasking system on any device. Just because of Samsung software, you can resize any of the windows to how you want. You can make them big, small, rotate them, and then you can also save them in app pairs in the exact orientation and state that you have them in, so that you can open those specific apps in that specific way. And if you wanted to, you can save the same apps in a different orientation. So you can create many different ways and layouts for how you want to use your device because of the flexibility of the multitasking system. And then speaking about the multitasking, I did say on the outside screen, you can have 5 floating windows and 2 apps in split screen at the same exact time for 7 apps in total on the screen. On the inside, you can do 1 more app. So triple split screen plus 5 apps in the floating window at the same exact time on the inside screen. So you can have 8 apps on the screen at once. I know that sounds crazy. Who would do that? Believe me, there's people that will do that. But at the same time, it's better to have features than not have them, and the flexibility that it gives you is just limitless. Because let's say you are using like 3 apps and you have 1 floating window, but let's say you need to open up another app. Somebody texted you and you want to check the text, but you don't want to full screen it. You don't want to tap the taskbar and go all the way to that app and leave your session, leave what you're doing. You can just quickly put the messaging app in a floating window, and that'll be your second floating window on top of your 3 apps in the background. You deal with that message and done. You can close that app or minimize it or toss off to the side, and floating window will still be there, still running in the background. So that's where the flexibility, I feel like, comes in play, and I think is underrated. It's not about like having everything on the screen all at once. It's more about the capability and the ability to do so when you need to. You might have like 7 apps on the screen, and you might need that one extra app just for 2 minutes to address something that came up, like an email or a calendar event or a reminder or etc. You might need to open the app real quick. Instead of leaving what you're doing, you can just open that app on top of everything else. So that's where having 8 apps on the screen is beautiful, in my opinion. And then to take it even further, there is something called Samsung DeX. If you're not familiar, Samsung DeX is a desktop mode. Traditionally, Samsung DeX was something that you use on the external screen. It takes your Android experience and it turns it into a desktop-like experience where you can open apps in floating windows. You have a taskbar. You can pin apps to your home screen. You can change your home screen wallpaper, which is independent of your built-in screen's wallpaper and setup and stuff. Now in One UI 8, you have widgets on your home screen in Samsung DeX and stuff like that. So it's kind of like a PC experience on an external screen. But now on the Z Trifold, you can do that on the built-in screen. This is something that I've been asking for since the Z Fold 2, Z Fold 3, and finally we have it on the Z Trifold. Hopefully it comes to things like the Z Fold 7, but basically what it does is it changes the way your phone works. So the taskbar, it shrinks a little bit, but it stays at the bottom, and you still have your home screen layout and everything. But now in Samsung DeX, when you tap an app, instead of it opening in full screen, it opens automatically in a floating window or a window, kind of like Windows and Mac OS, a computer. It's kind of like having just floating windows permanently or automatically on, but it's slightly different because you can drag the apps to the sides of the screen to quickly snap them to different sizes. You can drag it to the top for a full screen. You can double tap the bar to expand it. Just like Windows and Mac OS, it's not full screen, but it's kind of taking up, all of the screen real estate except for the top bar and the taskbar. You can do things like that. Also, the taskbar works a little bit differently. So if you tap and hold the app icons, you'll get different options, like for example, checking which windows are open or opening another instance of certain apps. And this is the beauty of Samsung software too, that people don't realize. With Samsung's apps, their first party apps, a lot of people hate them and say it's bloatware, whatever. Samsung's first party apps, most of them can have multiple instances of the app. And this is really useful for me personally, and depending on what you want to do. A lot of other apps can't do that. Like Google Keep Notes, Google's note-taking app, you cannot have multiple instances of it open. Google's file system, you can't have multiple instances of it open. And there's many other apps, but basically with Samsung Files, Samsung Notes, Samsung Internet, I know Google Chrome can have multiple instances, but a lot of phones don't even allow you to do that, or don't even let you do more than like 2 or 3 instances. But with Samsung's apps, you can have as many instances open as you want. Obviously within the limits of the floating window limitation and the split screen limitation, but you can open up many instances. Side by side, I can have 2 instances of the Files app just like I would on Windows, and I can drag and drop files back and forth between each of those windows. I can drag a picture from one note to another note. I can copy and paste between notes. I can look at 2 photos side by side, things like that. Samsung software is just nice in that way. So yeah, interacting with the taskbar is different in that sense. It's pretty much the experience you're used to, but just a little bit more like a computer. And even like opening apps from the app drawer is the same way, opens in a floating window. The cool thing about Samsung Dex on this built-in screen, and just in general now, is that you have the ability to have multiple desktops. And what that means is, like, let's say you open 5 apps in one desktop, you can now swipe over and that will be another desktop. It's like on Windows or Mac OS, swiping with 3 fingers over to another desktop, or creating another desktop. Now you can open separate apps in this next desktop, which basically allows you to have more than 5 apps open on the phone at the same time, low key. So it's like breaching that limit of 5 floating windows at a time. But basically you can use different apps and even different instances of apps in a different desktop, and then swipe back and forth between those desktops to do different things. So you can have like a media content consumption desktop. You can have a desktop where you're browsing the internet. You can have a desktop where you're, working on your finances and different documents, and swipe back and forth between them. The phone will save the setup and the layout of the apps and the positions that they're in, the sizing and all that stuff on those desktops. So this is really cool and makes it feel more like a computer. And that's why I say it kind of reaches to replace a laptop in that sense. And then when you connect to an external screen, Samsung Dex gets even better. I know I'm talking about it a lot, but the external screen basically gives you another screen. And in the past with Samsung Dex, with the phones, you would only be able to, like, you can still use your phone screen and use Samsung Dex on the external screen, but the 2 screens don't really interact with each other. You did have the ability to allow the mouse pointer to go across both screens, but still they didn't really interact with each other. But now with Samsung Dex and One UI 8 on the Z Trifold, you have the ability to have, it's basically 2 screens, and you can drag apps back and forth across the screens. You can drag files. Like, it's literally extended display. It's not just your phone screen working where you can do different things, and it's not like a regular phone UI on your phone screen. Now you have Samsung Dex on the built-in screen and on the external screen at the same exact time, and it's just really cool because you can drag apps across. Like I said, you can quickly do split screen sessions on both screens. You can have a video. You can respond to messages, whatever you want. And on top of all that, you can have 5 apps on the inside screen and 5 apps on the external screen at the same exact time. So basically you can have 10 apps open at the same exact time when you're connected to an external screen. Limitless multitasking, limitless capability when it comes to productivity. I mean, some people, this might feel like OD, it might be feel like too much or whatever. It might not feel productive, but the potential is just so crazy. So that's Samsung Dex, that's multitasking, and honestly how I've been using the Z Trifold a lot. Let's talk about gaming. In terms of performance, the Z Trifold is going to have similar performance to the Z Fold 7. I'm going to have a video coming out. I have a lot more videos coming out on the Z Trifold, but the performance is actually really good for what it is. It's so thin that, the thinnest point of the device can't even fit the USB-C port. So considering that, the performance is actually great. It has a Snapdragon 8 Elite chip. It's not the newest chip, but it's still a flagship level chip. Honestly, still right there. You can basically play any game. It's not going to be perfect, but you can still play every game. And some games, if you want to have a more comfortable experience, more stable experience, you can lower the graphics. But for the most part, the games I play work well. So I did mention Wild Rift earlier. Wild Rift on the Z Trifold is a locked 120 FPS when you're in full screen. In split screen, this is something I do often on my foldable phones. Sometimes can thermal throttle and drop to 60 FPS, but usually it's a locked 120 even in a split screen session. But when we're talking about aspect ratio, how do games size on the screen? A lot of games still on the Z Trifold unfortunately cut off information on the sides because the aspect ratio is not long enough for the game to, display properly, or games to display properly as proper as you would want. So in games like Call of Duty Mobile, you're still missing information on the sides. Games like Genshin Impact or Wild Rift or whatever, the camera is still a bit zoomed in because of the aspect ratio of the screen. It's not the most amazing experience for gaming in that sense. It's still better than a regular foldable phone in terms of aspect ratio and what you see on the screen. Like Wild Rift in full screen on regular foldable phones, I cannot play that seriously or competitively. Like if I'm playing on the full screen on a Z Fold 7 in Wild Rift, I have to play regular matches because you just can't see enough information. It's so limited in that sense. But with the Z Trifold, it's actually playable, and I played a couple ranked matches with the full screen, and it's not the best. You still can't see as much as a regular phone or the outside screen of the Z Trifold, but it works. And then here's where it gets really good in my opinion. Like I said, I normally split screen while playing a game for a better aspect ratio on my foldable phones. When you do that on the Z Trifold, because of how big the screen is, you get a good aspect ratio for the game, so everything formats properly. But then you get a huge version of like a regular smartphone screen. So although you're split screening and you're not using the whole screen for the game like you might want to, it's not a full screen app, it's still a really amazing experience. And it's just huge. Like Wild Rift this is probably the best Wild Rift experience I've had in terms of like how it looks and feels, because the aspect ratio is amazing when you do split screen. So there's that. And then the flexibility with the software, I can have YouTube at the top and then messaging app on the other side, and it just works. It's so tough. And you can obviously do different things, rotate the phone for different setups. I did try emulation. It's amazing, by the way, for DS emulation with a controller. Some controllers won't work in the landscape orientation because the phone is really long when it's open. So my 8-bit do controller like this, it doesn't extend long enough for the Z Trifold, unfortunately. But in vertical orientation, it works, and DS emulation is probably top tier. This might be the best experience or the best way to play DS games and 3DS games, to be honest. So next we'll talk about the cameras. The Z Trifold cameras are the Z Fold 7 cameras. Like literally, same specs. So whatever you got from your Z Fold 7 or whatever you've seen in YouTube videos, you can expect the same thing from the Z Trifold. I think the main camera is good. I love the 200 megapixel camera. It definitely is not perfect. You know, I feel like all phone cameras have their own flaws in different ways. Samsung's cameras have their own flaws in different ways. I like the 200 megapixel sensor. I think it still does a good job in most scenarios, and I can get reliably good photos and videos. The 3x telephoto camera is the one that I have beef with. I think it's time, bro. Samsung, we got to get rid of that. And I'm not talking about the zoom range. I'm not talking about the zoom range or the focal length. I don't care about the fact that it's 3x, because I'm using the Oppo Find X9 Pro to record this video, and this has a 3x telephoto camera, but that 3x camera is amazing. So I'm not talking about the zoom length. I'm talking about the sensor size and the quality of the camera. This 3x camera on the Z Trifold and the Z Fold 7 is trash, if we're being honest. Like you can get decent photos and videos in good lighting, but anything less than good lighting, perfect lighting, it looks like doo-doo, like if we're being honest. And even with good lighting, it's still not that good. So we need to get rid of that. The ultra wide camera is good enough for what it is. You know, it does what ultra wide cameras do. I don't think it's as way worse than any other phone's ultra wide camera, to be honest. I don't use ultra wide that much, but I think it's good enough. However, I would still welcome a 50 megapixel ultra wide camera like the S25 Ultra, or just an upgraded ultra wide camera in general. I want upgraded cameras, that's it. But mainly the telephoto camera, give me the 5x 50 megapixel sensor from the S25 Ultra, or give me imagine this. The Z Trifold, the Z Fold 7 with this telephoto camera of the Oppo Find X9 Pro or the Vivo X300 Pro. You know, all these top tier flagship phones. Imagine if these foldable phones had those cameras. It would be amazing. But yeah, outside the camera quality though, this phone does have some specialties. So immediately when I first got it, I was kind of disappointed in the camera experience in terms of using the form factor, the Hinge. But then I realized you can still do some of the things I missed. So with the Z Trifold, I thought you wouldn't be able to do something like this. You know, like regular foldable phones, I often put them on tripods and use the external screen as the viewfinder and the main camera on the back. Or you can use it for vlogging and selfies and stuff like that. This is something I do often with my foldable phones. I thought you couldn't do something as similar on the Z Trifold because of how long it is. It'd just be kind of awkward to do this same exact thing with the screen fully open, and it wouldn't fit well on tripod mounts. However, I discovered that you can. So you just open the screen, activate the external screen, and then you can do the swipe on the external screen to switch the control over to that screen, and then the inside screen will be blocked off from touch, and then boom, you just fold the right panel, and then you have the same exact experience as the Z Fold 7 in terms of like using the external screen while using the main cameras on a tripod mount. That's how I use the cameras on foldable phones, and it's no different with the Trifold. You know, the external screen just works so good as an external viewfinder while using the main camera and setting up your shot and stuff like that. You know, getting group photos, and specifically on a tripod, you have just different ways you can articulate the screen. Like for example, if I'm doing a top-down shot on my desk, I can flip up the external screen so that I can see it without breaking my neck. You know, I don't have to reach over the phone to see the viewfinder. I can just see it there while standing up straight, and then I can like easily show the product or whatever I'm doing on the desktop view without struggling. So I love the way the form factor complements different workflows like that. I think there's a lot of potential in using foldable phones for content creation, just creating media and videos and stuff like that. I think there's a lot of potential with the form factors, and the Z Trifold delivers there. In terms of standing it up to take photos and videos, it's not as easy to do or as simple as regular foldable phones, but it does have one advantage over regular foldable phones, and that's using the external screen in vertical orientation while propped up. With the Z Fold 7, you can't necessarily do that because the screen is going to be angled always. But with the Z Trifold, you can see the full screen and you can see the camera, like they're just both facing you. And then you use the third panel to prop it up, and it stands properly, you know, very stable. The only issue is that you can't angle it, but you wouldn't be able to do that on a regular foldable phone in portrait orientation anyways. That's one advantage. In terms of landscape photos and videos with the Hinge, regular foldable phones allow you to get, you know, easy sky shots and like group photos and stuff like that. You can just put them down and, you know, put your hand out for Samsung software to take a photo or say cheese and stuff like that. Regular foldable phones are great for that. The Z Trifold would be better if the hinges were more stiff and sturdy like the Huawei Mate XTs, but they're not. They're a bit floppy and they want to close or open. However, you can still get it to sit up at a certain point. When it sits up at that point, it's actually a better experience than the regular foldable phones because you can still see the external screen and the main camera, and it's holding itself up with its own built-in hinge. So that is like the maximum potential for this form factor, in my opinion, being able to do stuff like that. Because flex mode, believe it or not, is not really here on this device. I'll talk a little bit more about that after this. But yeah, that is one advantage, and honestly, I've been enjoying using the cameras in different ways. It's a real productivity beast. Like when you talk about filming content, taking photos and videos, editing those photos and videos on the device itself because of the huge screen, and then, you know, posting or sending or whatever you need to do with those photos and videos on the internal screen is amazing because of the space, the multitasking and all that stuff. It's a really tough device, and I think there's a lot of potential for people who like to get a lot of things done with one device, with all your files being in one place. Now, in terms of flex mode, this is something that I was kind of disappointed with in the beginning as well, because that's something I use on my foldable phones. And more specifically, like if let's say I'm cleaning the house or I'm just walking around, making food, whatever, I'll put my phone in flex mode and just, you know, prop it up, let it sit down while watching a video or something like that. Or just in general, I'll prop it up like this. The Z Trifold doesn't necessarily have a flex mode. The software doesn't acknowledge it being bent in that orientation like the Z Folds do. But I did discover different ways to use it thanks to this YouTube comment. Shout out to this guy. So at first I was kind of like, oh, you can't really do this because if you bend the camera side, it will kind of, you know, the phone tells you not to bend it that way. So it doesn't really work. But if you just bend it to like a 90-degree angle, it actually works. So you can kind of have some form of flex mode. And depending on who you are, maybe it's even more useful because you can have, you know, the whole other 80% of the screen to use. So in the scenarios on the screen that you're seeing, I'm doing this fake flex mode in a triple split screen. So I have 3 apps on the screen with one app being propped up so I can see it and watch it. And then the other apps, I can interact with them if I want to. So you can do some kind of flex mode, and then you can also prop it up vertically with the longer half being in the air, but that's not sustainable. It's kind of like taking the photos and videos with the external screen and camera. It feels like it's just going to fall over eventually, so I wouldn't do that for long periods of time or at all. This other orientation where most of the screen is flat and then you have the one panel sticking up, either panel works in this. It is decent. It works. And I feel like I could see people having different use cases for this mode, even though it's not an official mode. That's the flex mode situation. It's not perfect. As you see, there are some limitations with how this folding mechanism works, the hinges, and not being able to do everything that the regular foldable phones can do. But if you can figure out different workarounds, it can be better, like you saw with the external screen and the camera in different orientations. It is a bigger device. It is heavier. It is a bit more to maneuver than regular foldable phones. So it definitely has trade-offs for sure. It's not perfect. How it compares to tablets, I think it's literally a tablet. It's right there. It's kind of like an iPad mini. Yeah, the iPad mini is an 8.3-inch screen, which is pretty close to the Z Fold 7, like a regular foldable phone, which has an 8-inch screen in terms of like the vertical measurements. So the Z Trifold is actually bigger than the iPad mini screen. It delivers on that tablet experience more than the iPad mini, has better software to take advantage of the tablet. And the iPad mini is already really small. Like when I had an iPad mini, I could fit that in some of my pockets. But the Z Trifold folds up to be a regular phone that you can, you know, talk on, put in your pocket, use in different ways, take pictures like a regular phone. It really is a tablet. I've always liked smaller tablets, by the way. Like if there was a Pro iPad mini, I would have that. I would use that. That would be my tablet editing computer thing. I've been wanting a Pro iPad mini for a long time. The way I see the Z Trifold is it's basically a Pro iPad mini with good cameras. It has decent battery life. It can be your phone. It can be your computer. It can do so many different things. Compared to regular tablets, I have videos coming out on that to elaborate more on that. But like I said, it's right there. It has really good software, and it's just a thinner, lighter experience compared to tablets, you know, and it can fold up and fit in your pocket like a regular phone. That's how it really compares. Performance is going to be better on an actual tablet because the thermals are going to be better. They don't have to fold. They're not as thin. They have more space to work with, but this is like right there in terms of like decent performance while offering a good tablet experience. How does it compare to regular phones? I mean, you could probably tell it's thicker, heavier, and it's not as easy to maneuver, but it's a flagship experience nonetheless. And like I said before, performance is good. The camera experience is good enough. For the 1X, you know, the zoom camera is not that good. Ultra wide is okay, but 45-watt charging speeds, a decent sized battery. If you only use the outside screen, this is probably like using the S25 Ultra, but smaller and slimmer and more heavier, and you don't have the extra 2 good cameras. Yeah, that's the Z Trifold. I talked a lot in this video. I will have more concise versions and reviews of this and talking about different aspects. More videos in general are coming out on the Z Trifold. I wanted to make this video to give you a 1 month later of the Z Trifold experience, so stay tuned for future videos. And yeah, we out. Peace.